Hello, my name is Mike Tesaro and I prepared this ACCC cheat sheet for September 2025. As you can see, I've fallen behind again. It's 25th of November. But fortunately, September wasn't a busy month by ACCC standards, so I should be able to get through this fairly quickly. I guess I also like the image of that cheating rabbit. He's a smart rabbit, isn't he? Okay, so a bit of background about myself. I'm a competition and consumer lawyer, and I've been running my own practice at Sarah Legal Consulting for 18 years, and I help companies, individuals with competition and consumer law matters. I also do some expert consultancy on competition and consumer law for various legal publishers. And I got another part-time role as a general member of NCAT. I work in the consumer and commercial division. So in that role, I get the chance to apply the Australian consumer law to real life situations. Prior to that, I worked at the ACCC for 15 years in a variety of roles, including in enforcement and mergers. The outline, there's court cases, a couple of those, enforcement, three of those, some mergers, authorisations, inquiries and consultations, and then two other matters. The first case was the ACCC Optus mobile case, and this related to allegations that Optus had, through some of its franchises in the northern Australia, had missold products to various consumers. And it was very similar to the conduct that Telstra got in trouble for a few years ago, where they got fined 50 million. So effectively, the allegation was that they were selling products through their franchises to consumers, and often the consumers did not want the products, did not need the product, could not use the product, and in most cases could not afford the products they were sold. And after being missold the products, Optus pursued them for the debts. And as you can see, a lot of vulnerable consumers are involved in this conduct. A lot of them were people with mental disabilities, diminished cognitive capacity, learning difficulties, financially dependent, unemployed, didn't have English as a first language, First Nations individuals living in remote parts of Australia. So very bad conduct. And what's happened is they recommended to the court by consent a penalty of $100 million, and the court accepted that penalty, and that's been imposed. Some of the conduct that was set out in the obviously the court documents and the judgment and also the media release was that Optus had put undue pressure on consumers to purchase a large number of products, including very expensive phones, accessories, and often they didn't say they wanted those products. They were sort of pressured into buying them. They could not use the particular products and they could not afford them. They failed to explain relevant terms and conditions to vulnerable consumers, and effectively they didn't quite know the obligations they were getting into, particularly their ongoing financial commitments. This is particularly bad. They sold people products where Optus didn't have coverage, so they're just going to get this very expensive paperweight that they can't actually use to make calls. So that's really bad conduct. Selling products that Optus knew or ought reasonably to have known the customers could not afford. In this regard, it's relevant that there was some allegation of potential fraud by some of these franchise employees, actually falsifying the various documents that have to be submitted to prove that the consumer can pay for the product. So those records allegedly were falsified in a number of cases. And finally, misleading consumers to believe that some additional products that were part of the package were actually free when they weren't. They actually had to pay for them. So it's really bad conduct. And I guess Optus needs to put it behind them and try to improve their compliance. Second case involved the Good Guys, and this is one where Good Guys and ACCC came to an agreement on a penalty of $13.5 million, which the court has endorsed. And this related to their store cash promotions and impacted allegedly 20,000 consumers. And they ran a lot of promotions, 116 promotions between July 2019 and August 2023, so a lot of promotions. And what was being done here was telling consumers about store credit or something called store cash. And they said that if you'd spent a certain minimum amount or you purchased specific brands of products or used a particular payment method, you get this free store credit. But they failed to point out some important qualifications on this offer. The first one was that you had to use store credit very quickly, between 7 and 10 days. So if you don't know that, by the time you get back to the Good Guys, it's all gone. That's a pretty big omission. Also, that in order to get this store credit, you had to remain opted in to marketing communication. So I guess, again, if you don't know that's the term of the offer, then you might just tick the box to say you don't want marketing communications, and there goes your store credit. So pretty big fail by Good Guys. Good they settled it. Was I was going to lose this case. So I like it when companies do that. They can see the writing on the wall and they settle the case quickly. No point dragging a case out for a couple of years and then giving up. Enforced matters. The first was in relation to supplies of fresh vegetables to Aldi. And what happened here on the 1st September, the ACCC commenced proceedings against 4 companies and a few individuals alleging that they got together to set the prices of fresh vegetables to Aldi. And this is an allegation, so I won't say too much about it, but the ACCC has alleged that on 28 occasions, 2 or more of those companies got together and tried to make an agreement, or actually made an agreement, to set the prices of broccoli, cauliflower, iceberg lettuce, cucumber, Brussels sprouts, or zucchini. So tried to push the prices up for those items. And I won't make any bad jokes about Brussels sprouts. They're very good for you. But if you put the price up, it's less incentive to buy them, isn't it, really? And on 48 occasions, it's alleged that they actually submitted prices to Aldi in accordance with the arrangement understanding. So it looks very serious. It's interesting where the complaint came from, whether maybe there was a 5th player who blew the whistle, or maybe Aldi's compliance processes actually picked up the issue and they brought it to the ACCC attention. I don't really know. This is a case I won't talk about too much because I'm actually retained by one of the companies to assist them, not in the litigation, but in terms of helping them set up compliance programs and all the rest of it. So on the 3rd of September, the ACCC commenced civil cartel proceedings against Borger Cranes, which is a company I'm working for, MCR Melrose, two-way cranes and ultra-lift cranes, and a number of individuals. And what's been alleged here is they're alleging these companies got together to restrict the supply of goods and goods and services to particular customers, namely clients, building companies. And effectively, they said we're not supply cranes to these particular sites or customers. Also, there's an allegation that Melrose was involved in 3 attempts to fix mobile crane rates. And the final one was allegation that Borger tried to set the price of cross-hire rates. Okay, the next one was Just Answer LLC, which you may be familiar with. It's an overseas company and it provides, you can get answers to questions on demand. And on 23rd of September, the ACCC commenced proceedings against the company, alleging that they had done 2 things, made false representations about pricing, and also claimed they had affiliation of relevant government departments. And as you can see there, the first allegation was they said you could sign up through a chat widget on its website to get the service, and it only cost you $2. But the reality was you actually had to sign up to an ongoing subscription costing between $50 and $90 per month. There's probably a subscription trap allegation, which is one of the things ACCC had as its priorities for this year. The second one was Just Answer allegedly told consumers that it had affiliation with various government departments, particularly Fair Work Ombudsman. So these are allegations at this stage, but if you have a look at the particular advertisements which were in the ACCC media release, it looks pretty clear cut to me. Here you've got the appliance technician. You can have a chat to him about various issues, and then you can see third dot point end of the line says joined for only $2 AU, and there's no qualification, no asterisk, no nothing. So if you see that, you're probably going to think, well, it's going to cost me $2. I don't have any subscription that I've got to commit to. So that doesn't look too good for Just Answer. Second one, this one is, I think it looks worse than the other one. Chat with a Fair Work Ombudsman. So it looks like you can actually get on the line, have a chat to somebody from Fair Work, and they can tell you stuff. But it's not true. You can't talk to them in this way. It's actually private lawyers. So that looks like a pretty blatant misrepresentation. I don't know the ins and outs, but on its face, I think if I Just Answer, I'd be just settling this as quickly as possible. In terms of mergers, the first one, IAG and RAC Insurance. And here the ACCC has expressed concerns about this acquisition. It's really buying probably the largest insurer in WA, RAC Insurance. And the ACCC is concerned that if the merger goes through, it'd be lessening competition in relation to motor vehicle insurance and home and contents in WA, enable IAG to increase premiums and reduce the quality of the products it sells, and also IAG could limit rivals insurers' access to cost-effective repairers in WA. They're not looking good for IAG. This is an interesting one. This is a merger involving cement companies, and I think it's fair to say cement companies have a pretty bad reputation in terms of anti-competitive conduct. So ACCC will be extra scrupulous here in terms of seeing what's going on. There was an initial proposal whereby BGC was going to be acquired by Cement Australia, Holcim and HMA. ACCC was concerned about that and said we probably oppose that. So the parties came back with a new deal whereby certain assets of the target, which is BGC Cementitious, I think, some of the assets would be bought by the three companies initially involved, Cement Australia, Holcim and HMA, but then some other assets of concern would be bought by another player, Adbri. So this is quite interesting. I think the way that they've come back with a very different structured deal, and it looks like it's going to get through. So in relation to this structured deal, the ACCC is sounding pretty positive. They're saying, hey, there's going to be lots of excess capacity in the market. So try and price fix is a bit of a dumb idea because people can just engage in a price war by dropping a lot of excess supply to the market. They looked closely at the margins the merger parties would be earning at various levels of supply chain and looked at their incentives to engage in cartel behaviour or even unilateral market power, the exercise of that. Also looked at the extent to which acquirers would have market power and able to increase the price of products across Perth. Also looking at localised markets, so that's interesting. And then finally, we've got some lighting problems here. The ACCC found, based on a detailed analysis of delivery patterns, marginal cost, and so on, that rival suppliers would constrain the exercise of market power across Perth. Inquiries and consultations of measuring broadband report. This is really looking at fibre to the node connections, which is the second quality or not so good quality mobile connection. It's not to the premises, and it's getting a bit wild outside here. I think there might be a tornado coming. But anyway, they're looking at how well the fibre to the node competes, and their conclusion was that they really are underperforming quite badly. 86% of all underperforming connections are FTTN, and rarely do these programs achieve 75% of their planned download speed. As you can see, you're looking at some of the statistics there, and it's pretty negative. So I guess the idea to go fibre to the node to save a bit of dough, as the government decided a few years ago, was maybe not a great idea because they're providing a substandard service. Wasn't so bad in relation to 50 and 25 megabytes per second. Petrol monitoring report here showing prices are all going down for petrol and diesel, and this is all driven by international factors, looking at supply, crude oil prices, exchange rates, and so on. And I guess the point of this report is just to reassure local consumers that nothing untoward's happening in the domestic market. So clearly, if all the international factors are suggesting the price should be going down and they're not, or they're going up, then you'd suspect there's some sort of domestic cartel. So this is sort of a reassurance that nothing funny is happening. There's their little diagram they put in their report, which has all the information. Just look at that, they've found their report very helpful. Then the broadband access report. Now this is in relation to the access determination which applies to super fast broadband access services. So there's an access determination in place, and it does restrict the amounts people can charge and forces providers to give access to access seekers. So here the question was, obviously, we're going to maintain the determination. It's important to have it in place, but a few tweaks were made to the determination. The first is incorporate additional access terms. So this will give access seekers additional number and location of points of access in the relevant network. Also some safeguards to prevent unreasonable access terms or conditions or things that would prevent access being obtained. Also some transparency obligations to SBAS providers have to publish their standard wholesale pricing and access terms. And finally, is Vision Network, which is an old legacy network, has been given a bit of a pass on some of these obligations. So that's very nice for Vision Network. Authorisations, there were only three, but I guess the first one, Australian Payment Network Limited, effectively it was an old authorisation which was revoked and replaced, and this is allowing the issuers and acquirers community to continue working together in the implementation of certification, suspension, termination provisions of this IAC framework. The second one was SACOM, which is the South Australian Chamber of Mines and Energy. They want to get together to jointly acquire electricity, and that's been agreed to. And obviously that's something that is very efficient, reduced transaction costs, a lot of public benefits. So that's been signed off by the ACCC. The big one was Australian Payment Network Limited. Now, this is a change in the encryption standards which are used in Australian payments. And so here it's been authorised for AusPayNet and its various members to continue talking and giving effect to agreements to facilitate the transmission or the migration of the Australian card payment systems from the current triple data encryption standard to the more secure advanced encryption standard. So they're moving from the other. You think triple data encryption standard sounds pretty good, but obviously advanced encryption standard is better. And also allowed to share information to monitor the progress, report issues, develop solutions on this transition from one encryption standard to another. This is a sort of a bit of sideline issue. There's a Digital Platforms Regulated Forum, ACCC, ACMA, Privacy Commissioner, etc., and they get together and they do various things, which is very good, very good. And they also put out a number of discussion papers, and they put out 3 or 4 before. The most recent one that was released was on immersive technology, so looking at immersive technologies or extended reality technologies, and they're trying to work out what the impact of that would be on various regulatory roles. And clearly the main factors are the risk and harms, digital companies seeking too much data, not maintaining data securely, getting personal and sensitive data, not using it for purposes that the users haven't consented to. So it's exploring all those potential issues. The final other was the 2025 Competition and Consumer Workshop address by Jenna Gottlieb. So the Competition Consumer Committee is a committee I'm on, and it meets once a year for a big workshop. I didn't go this year because in Melbourne I had other things on, but effectively the chairperson of the ACCC gives a talk and talks about various things. Jenna Gottlieb is probably uses the opportunity just to update people as to what's going on. Doesn't carry on like some of the other chairs did in the past. But here she's talking about a variety of issues, enduring principles for the uncertain future. Right-size regulation is a big issue now currently in relation to all federal government departments to try and find efficiencies and removing red tape. Competition enforcement, consumer enforcement, and trying to make markets work. So a bit of commentary, the Optus case. I probably thought that maybe a $75 million penalty would be applied there, but Optus has agreed to $100 million. I didn't think it was twice as bad as Telstra's case, but anyway, it was very bad conduct, and you're sort of wondering what's going on at Optus. They spend a lot on compliance, but I think it's the case that you need somebody to come in who will just tell them what they need to know, and I think that's part of the problem. People are maybe not, courageous enough to tell the management what needs to happen to improve their compliance and get rid of various systems that aren't working. But they're going to continue having trouble unless they take a very, very serious look at their compliance and fix it up. Aldi and the Crane case are very significant cases. So there are allegations at the moment. I just think with the Crane cases, I know a little bit about it. I'm just wondering whether it's quite as bad as it looks. I think there was an element of builders not paying crane companies for using their equipment, and the crane companies saying, hey, I haven't been paid for this crane that I hired this builder, and letting other crane companies know, hey, watch out. So that sounds slightly benevolent in my view. The cross-hire rates is interesting. You might tender for some work and have to provide a bunch of cranes to a consumer. You can't provide them all. You desperately need something. You've got to hire a crane from your competitor. So you want some certainty as to what that's going to cost. So again, I'm just wondering if this case is as serious as the ACCC thinks. I guess we'll wait and see. But I think there's some pretty good arguments, I think, that can be made that the conduct definitely wasn't a classic cartel in a number of respects. The BGC Cementios merger is very interesting. It shows you a few things. ACCC will be open to amending a proposal to remove competition concerns. I guess the big thing there is it's an industry you've got to be a bit careful about. You've got cement is one of the 3 C's in terms of price fixing. They always seem to be involved in price fixing. So you just got to be extra careful. I guess construction, chemicals, and cement, that's the 3 C's. And so here they've done a very sophisticated analysis to work out whether the proposed divestiture would address issues. They've looked at a lot of issues like marginal costs. They've looked at freight distribution or transport patterns and a lot of issues, and they've worked out this merger won't lessen competition. So I think it shows the ACCC going to a whole new level in terms of analysis. It's very, very positive. I thought the IAG, I think that's a problematic case for the ACCC. I just can't see that that's a breach. I did a few financial mergers when I was back at the ACCC in Sydney, and it hit me often that the markets are usually national. There's nothing to prevent a person in New South Wales entering into an insurance policy for home and contents or even car insurance from a provider in another state. So I don't think there's a local market there. If it was a local market, I'm even wondering whether it'd be a breach, because as I understand it, IG has a small market share. The Target has a big market share. It's probably more like a bare transfer of market power. So I think the ACCC has got that one wrong. I don't think it's a breach, and I think it's a national market. The other thing you've got to be conscious of these smaller targets, whether they can actually keep surviving in a tough insurance market. I don't know if they run a failing firm argument, but there'd be a strong argument that they can't get underwriting at the same costs as the biggies, and they're going to struggle to compete. The final thing was a workshop speech. I like the way Gina Cascott-Lee does this. She comes in and she provides valuable information, some good insights. Some of the previous chairs said before used to go a bit off the deep end and say some crazy things, I think. But she's been really good in the way she's presented things. And I think the big focus at the moment is like there's a lot of talk about we need to increase our productivity as a nation, and that might be being impeded by too much regulation. There's probably some truth to that, but don't, as they say, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I love that expression. Very visual, isn't it? But the risk is that, you got the big end of town sort of saying, oh, we've got to curb ACCC and ASIC powers because we need less regulation so we can, grow our markets. But I don't think that's really the solution. There's a lot of important regulation, a lot of breaches by corporations in relation to both competition and consumer law, corporations law. You don't want to be reducing regulation unnecessarily there, particularly in a market, Australian market, where you've got so many duopolies and oligopolies. It's very uncompetitive. So I guess Gina Cascott talks about right-sized regulation and making sure that things are suitable for the purpose, but ultimately you don't want to let big business get away with too many changes there. The other thing I think is concerning, and she talks about this a bit, but the digital platforms reforms, where they were going to bring in codes of conduct for digital platforms, seems to have gone cold again. ACCC recommended it quite a while ago. The government was pretty cold, and then the government seemed to be really into it again, and now they've gone cold again. The ACCC's digital platforms team is being decimated. They're not getting funding. They're all leaving. It's gone down to a very small group. It's a brilliant team of people. And I just got a bad feeling that Albanese's sort of gone cold in the idea. And the only explanation I can see is that he's worried about Donald Trump. Like, Donald Trump wants to protect his local digital companies from any interference by, us little nations like Australia and the rest of it. So just wondering whether the Albanese has decided to pull back on going through with that digital platform reforms because he's worried about how Donald Trump will react to it. I guess the problem here is that there are issues with the way the digital platforms are operating in markets. Let's face it, they've all been busted for breaches of the law. Google's been fined $100 million, or $50 million, another 50 coming. Facebook's been done. Apple's been done in the big private action. They're all engaging in conduct that's against the law. They've got market power. They're using it. We need a regulation. We need some further powers. And for Albanese not to bring something in is just, I don't know, it just seems very short-sighted. So hopefully the ACCC get the powers that it needs to really rein in these digital platforms. So that's all I had. A bit of a got on a high horse there at the end. But anyway, if you have any questions about any of this, feel free to give me a call or send me an email. Bye-bye.